Hello students, I am Abhishek Parmar. Today we are going to start a program which we have been calling it as Prelims Through Questions. It's not just a test series program, it's a specific way to prepare for the preliminary exam which is going to be held on 27th June. And in this program, we will discuss questions elaborately and will tell you the different facets of a particular topic also while discussing the question. So, starting with the first question, and the first question in front of you is question number 1. From whom among the following did Captain Hawkins obtain the royal firman to open factories and trade in India? Options are Murshid Quli Khan, Aurangzeb, Shahjahan, Jahangir. So, this is Captain Hawkins. He was actually ambassador of the British company, British Trading Company, and this British Trading Company was called as East India Company. East India Company, which had been established in the year 1599, and in the next year, that is 31st December, last day of the next year, 1600, it obtained a royal charter. Charter is like a license. It obtained a royal charter, that is permission. It was a private trading company, so it obtained a royal charter to trade with the East. And this charter was given for a period of 15 years. The charter was given for a period of 15 years. So, company sailed for India, and the company's ambassador, later the company's ambassador, Captain William, he is William Hawkins. He reached the court of Jahangir in 1608. In Jahangir's court in the year 1608, Jahangir's ruling period is 1605 to 27. Shahjahan was the son of Jahangir, 1627 to 57. Aurangzeb was the son of Shahjahan, 1658 to 1707. And Murshid Quli Khan was the Nawab of Bengal, who had established Bengal sort of as a semi-independent state. So, they were the Mughal emperors, the last three were the Mughal emperors, and William Hawkins obtained the royal firman to open a factory at Surat, and Jahangir gave the permission to establish a factory at Surat. If you would be thinking that why Jahangir had given the permission, for example, to promote trade from India to the Western world. And at that point of time, Mughals were powerful enough that if you are thinking that later this company would enslave the Mughal or enslave India, so in 1608, nobody had any idea, see the prowess of the mighty Mughal empire, that this mere company would be able to dominate the Indian subcontinent, later after 150 years. So, it's beyond the capacity of a human being to guess what will happen 150 years earlier to his own empire. Whatever it is, for promoting trade and commerce, Jahangir gave the permission to William Hawkins to open a factory on the western coast of India. So, company planned to open a factory at Surat because it had received permission in 1608, though actually factory got established in the year 1613. Is it okay? Actually, Surat factory was established in 1613, permission was given in 1608. And when we see the word factory, which had been repeatedly appearing here, so the word factory, it was not a manufacturing. In the 16th or 17th or 18th century, the word factory did not symbolize any manufacturing unit. Rather, it was like this. Suppose this is the map of peninsular India. So, factories were established here and there. They were trading centers. They were trading centers. So, at these places what used to happen, goods were assembled and then loaded onto the ships for Europe. So, it was just a storehouse, and accountants or clerical staff used to work, accountants or clerical staff used to work there, and those clerical staff of the East India Company, they were designated as factor. The lowest or the low paid employees, who used to work, the low paid clerical staff who used to work in these trading centers where goods were stored, they were called as factor. Since it was the place where factors used to work, so therefore it is known as factories. But factory in the 17th century did not mean any manufacturing unit, it was just a godown, it was a warehouse, it was storage, and the name had derived from the word factor. Factors used to be the clerical staff who used to work in those trading centers. So, I hope it is clear that Captain William Hawkins obtained a royal farman, from the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, who was ruling in the period 1605 to 1627, and gave permission to Captain William Hawkins or the company to establish factory on the western coast, though the factory got established later in the year 1613. Okay, so done class. Moving to the next question. Second, with reference to the Charter of 1600 of British government, consider the following statements. You see, this was the charter which I was discussing earlier, Charter of 1600, and this Charter of 1600, it was given by the contemporary British ruler Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth I, she gave the charter on to EIC, granting privilege of trading east of Cape of Good Hope for a period of 15. What is privilege here? And that too, what is written? Exclusive privilege. So, exclusiveness was what? None of the company from Britain was allowed to trade with the Eastern world. From England, it was a kind of monopoly which had been extended to the East India Company. No other private company was given the permission to trade with the Eastern world. It was just East India Company alone. So, this was the exclusive privilege which had been assigned to the company, because company had bribed the monarch with costly presents and gifts. Company had bribed the monarch with costly presents and gifts. That is how it had obtained that permission to trade with the East for a period of 15 years. So, that is what charter means, license to trade. Management of the company was bestowed to a committee consisting of 7 members. Which of these statements are correct? First of all, the second statement is wrong and first is correct. So, 2A. In the first question, the answer was Jahangir, D. In the second question, the answer is A. Now, this company, East India Company, had to manage also. So, the East India Company office was in London. It was located in London, and the office was called as East India House. The office was known as East India House, and it operated from London. And in India, when we are talking about factories were storehouses, godowns. Every factory had an officer, the topmost officer. The factory had the officer who was called as governor, who was known as governor. In England, in London, East India Company, which was a private company and issued shares. Issued shares. Issued shares. So the shareholder, they were called as proprietor. Shareholders of the company are called as proprietors. Okay, they were known as proprietor, and the management of the company was actually to be done by directors. Now question is, who is director? So these proprietors, the shareholders, okay, proprietor was nothing but shareholder. So these proprietors used to elect 24 directors. How many? 24. They elected director, and they were in total 24 in number. So the management of this company was the supreme authority of the company, operating from London, from its office called as East India House, located in London. This had 24 directors, and these 24 directors, when they are sitting jointly, that authority was called as Court of Director. And in short, we say simply COD. So COD used to manage. In India, governors of different factories, they were responsible to COD. And company gradually kept on opening factories at Masulipatam, at you can say Madras, at Fort William, that is Calcutta, Bombay and all. So for question number 2, answer is A. Second option is wrong. Thirdly, with reference to the Battle of Plassey, consider the following statements. The English victory in the battle helped them in Anglo-French rivalry. True. Mir Qasim was made the Nawab of Bengal after the battle. Wrong. Only one is correct. So with reference to Battle of Plassey, first of all, Plassey. Plassey was the battle which was fought on 23rd June 1757. Why it was fought? Because in the first question, when we are discussing about factory, there was the first option Murshid Quli Khan. He was the Nawab of Bengal. Later in the year 1756, this Bengal had a young Nawab, young aggressive Nawab, Siraj-ud-Dawla. Siraj-ud-Dawla. The company, East India Company, okay, it had already its factory. It had its factory in Bengal at Fort William, modern day Calcutta. Modern day Calcutta. In history, even if the exam is not too much concerned about the dates, but we have to keep a track. So अगर आप पूछ रहे रटना है, नहीं रटना नहीं है, स्टोरी समझो आप आराम से, कोई दिक्कत नहीं, रटने की जरूरत ही नहीं है. Don't try to mug up. And all those things which are important, okay, the dates, the year, okay, they will automatically, by repeated reading, you will be able to remember it, recollect it. जैसे एक चीज पूछ रहा हूं आपसे, भारत कब आजाद हुआ? रटते हो आप? 1947, 1947. Automatically, you know, by repeated reading, by celebration and all. Similarly, when you read the history, you will get automatically used to, okay, remembering all these important things, because important, if it is important, it will come repeatedly in the course. So we are studying mid 18th century, 1756, 1757, like that. In this mid 18th century, England and France were rivals. They had great rivalry also, England and France. French had its factory, This was English factory, and the French factory was at Chandranagar or Chandarnagar. England and France fought war, which is called as 7 Years' War. 7 Years' War, simply because it lasted for 7 years. Okay. 1756 to 63. Contemplating that since the war is going to begin between England and France, the respective companies in India, I am repeating, contemplating that the war is going to start in Europe, the respective factories in India like English company, respective companies, they started building a wall around their factory. एक दीवार बनाने लगे प्रोटेक्शन के लिए. So East India Company started building a wall around Fort William, and French company started building a wall around Chandarnagar. But interestingly, at this point of time, there is another Nawab who has ascended the throne, Siraj-ud-Dawla. A young aggressive, he did not like this building wall. He was of this viewpoint that if you need protection, I am there to protect you. You should not take law into your own hand and start fortification, building fort and all. So he asked to remove this wall. And there are some other issues which finally led to the Battle of Plassey, for 30 kilometers from the capital city Murshidabad. And in this Plassey is also said as a battle which was not a proper battle, rather an act of betrayal. Betrayal matlab dhokha. And who betrayed the Nawab? His own army commander. Okay. His own army commander, who was promised that he will be made as the next Nawab by Robert Clive. So this Mir Jafar betrayed the Nawab Siraj-ud-Dawla. And since because of this betrayal, the victory over Plassey or the victory over Siraj-ud-Dawla was easy. So Plassey was fought in 1757 and British won the war. And it placed the wealth of Bengal was the richest province in India. So the wealth of Bengal was at the disposal of the company. Company के पास आ गई पैसा. And this money company used to finance in South India Carnatic wars. And we also say Carnatic wars as what? Anglo-French rivalry. Why do you say Anglo-French rivalry? Because the war was fought here in this region. The war was fought here in this region, and this was called as Carnatic. This was known as Carnatic. Since the war was fought here, this region is known as Carnatic, so therefore it is known as Carnatic War. And the third Carnatic War was in this year. In some of the questions, there will be a particular question which will be discussing about the Carnatic War. So there I will talk in detail the Carnatic War. Right now, just concentrate here the third Carnatic War. This third Carnatic War finally decided the battle in favor of the British. And you see, 2 years earlier or 1 year earlier, Plassey had already been successful, or Plassey had already tilted the favor, or tilted the balance in favor of the British. So the wealth which British has started taking from or getting from Bengal, they used that wealth in the Carnatic War. Now read this statement: the English victory in the battle helped them in Anglo-French War. Anglo-French is also called as Carnatic War. Why Carnatic? Because the region was fight Carnatic. Mir Qasim was made the Nawab of Bengal. No, after the battle, who was made Nawab? Mir Jafar, because he had earlier betrayed, and as Robert Clive had promised him, he was made as the Nawab. So after this Siraj, he became the Nawab from 1757 and 1760. Once in future, when he will be removed in 1760, then Qasim will become the Nawab. So Qasim became Nawab after Jafar. It is Siraj, then Mir Jafar, then Mir Qasim. So statement 2 is wrong, statement 1 is correct. Answer is third A. Next, question number 4. With reference to succession states, consider the following statements. So class, first of all, the Mughal Empire established by Babur, it kept on adding areas up to Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb, okay, the Mughal Emperor Babur, followed by Humayun, then Akbar, then Jahangir, then Shah Jahan, then Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb ruled over maximum number of years, 49, and maximum area. The area of Aurangzeb, the area of his kingdom empire, was greater than even Akbar. But the problem was that Aurangzeb was the last great Mughal, and once he died in 1707, the Mughal state started declining and new kingdoms started emerging. It was not like that Aurangzeb died in 1707, so immediately in 1708 new kingdoms emerged. Obviously the rupture, the breakdown will take some time. So roughly around 15 years after the death of Aurangzeb. So we will not be precise in the terms of year, that is not important. Roughly you just remember 15 years after the death of Aurangzeb, meaning 1720s, somewhere 1707 plus 15, अब देखो 1722 आ रहा है. तो in the decade of 1720s, new kingdoms started emerging. Who were those kingdoms? They were those kingdoms who succeeded whom? Mughals or Mughal Empire. Therefore, these kingdoms are known as successor states. Successor states. These states decentralize the political authority. Obviously, centralized is concentration of power at one point, decentralized dispersal. So these states decentralize the political authority. So the political authority which was concentrated in Delhi under the Mughals or Agra, that authority started witnessing decentralization. So these states decentralize the political authority, and in 1720s, in the decade of 1720s, three prominent kingdoms were established. First of all, somehow trying to locate those areas where these kingdoms were established. If it is visible, suppose roughly I am making the map of India. So one was Bengal, another was Awadh. Bengal, very familiar with this part of the country. Awadh is present day central UP. At that time, Awadh, British used to call it as Oudh, O-U-D-H. And one was this region, Hyderabad. And the founders of these kingdoms, I must mention here. So, in case of Bengal, it was established by Murshid Quli Khan, who operated from a city named after him, Murshidabad. In case of Awadh, it was Saadat Khan. And the third state, Hyderabad, Chin Kilich Khan. Okay, Chin Kilich Khan, who held a title called as Nizam. Nizam was the title. So Hyderabad rulers henceforth began to be called as Nizams of Hyderabad. And Nizam was a title, just a title. Actually, the entire medieval India, the court language of the Delhi Sultans or the Mughals was Persian. And in Persian language, administration means Nizamat. Administration means Nizamat. So, from here the word Nizam had appeared. From here the word Nizam had appeared. That he was good in administration, he was good in job, so therefore Nizam. So, they were established here, and these states were completely independent of Mughal authority. No, this is not true. They are not completely independent. Okay. They are not completely independent. They are partially independent or semi-independent. How can I say that they are partially independent? Because they themselves did not declare their own independence. Rather, they used to send occasionally presents and gifts to the Mughal emperor. These gifts and presents in the medieval history, when a subordinate sends to the higher authority, those gifts and presents were called as Nazrana, or even at times Peshkash. Okay, Nazrana or Peshkash. I hope done. So, they were not completely independent, they were semi-independent or partially independent. Thirdly, these states were formed as a result of repression by Mughal officials. No, not by repression, but with the zeal and enthusiasm of having their own independence. So, they were not established by repression. And these three kingdoms were established all in the decade of 1720s. Since they succeeded the Mughals, so they were called as successor states, and they represented decentralized political authority and were not completely independent. So, these states were decentralized political authority. Okay, true. Second, completely independent, false. Third, false. Answer will be only one. Question number 4, answer is 1. Moving to the next question, number 5. Consider the following statements. Number 1, Pitt's India Act of 1784 distinguished between the commercial and political functions of the English East India Company. Number 2, the Regulating Act of 1773 provided for a Supreme Court at Calcutta. The previous questions in which we were talking about the East India Company came to India as a trading company and had established several factories in different parts of India and traded. Okay. Basically exchange the goods. So, after the Plassey and the Battle of Buxar, Plassey, as I often say, is more of a battle which reflected no military success, rather diplomatic success, because the East India Company's officers like Robert Clive had already bribed the top-notch officials of the Nawab. But Buxar undoubtedly established company as the supreme power in Bengal, because Buxar, or in the Battle of Buxar, 3 kingdoms were defeated: the Mughal Empire himself, the Mughal Emperor himself, Awadh Nawab, and this Nawab of Bengal, the fugitive Nawab of Bengal. So, company became the master of Bengal, but still in 1764 or 1765, company did not want to project itself as a ruler. It wanted to behave like a trading company only. Though indirectly they were behaving like a ruler, but they did not wish to directly rule. They just wanted to act as a trading company and be the kingmaker. So, they established an arrangement where power was with them, but the responsibility was with the Nawab of Bengal for administering Bengal. This setup is called as dual government. which I will discuss in another question. There is a question regarding this one also. So, for regulating the affairs of the company, that how company should rule, how it should make rules and regulations for administering India, an act was passed in 1773, that is called as Regulating Act, and the word itself makes it clear. Regulating Act of 1773, because just for what reason? To regulate the affairs of the company. So, it did what? Dual government of Bengal had ended. Suppose this is Bengal, and residents of Bengal, they must abide by the rules and regulations made by the company or company's officers in India. So, if somebody would disobey any law, आज भी अगर आप कोई कानून तोड़ो तो आपका एक ट्रायल होगा कोर्ट में, फिर जैसा भी होगा आपने जैसा किया होगा उसके हिसाब से सजा होगी जज द्वारा. Similarly, the Regulating Act of 1773 provided that in Calcutta there would be a Supreme Court. Means a person who is not happy by the verdicts of the lower courts or the subordinate courts, he can reach in the Supreme Court. And this establishment of Supreme Court was laid down in the Regulating Act 1773. Actually, the Supreme Court was established next year 1774 at Calcutta. At Calcutta. And this Supreme Court would have a Chief Justice and 3 subordinate judges. The first Chief Justice was Elijah MP. Elijah MP, first Chief Justice. So, he would adjudicate the cases brought before him. So, Regulating Act of 1773 provided for a Supreme Court at Calcutta. True, this is true. Now, Pitt's India Act of 1784 distinguished between the commercial and political functions of the English East India Company. This is also true. What is Pitt's India Act? Why it is called as Pitt's India Act? The act which was passed in 1784, in that time the British Prime Minister was William Pitt. Since act was passed when British Prime Minister was William Pitt, so therefore it is known as Pitt's India Act 1784. And roughly if you suppose that this much is the territory by that time of East India Company. So, Pitt's India Act 1784 separated the power, separated the authority, in the sense that the governor, the government of India, the company's government of India the British government of India will report to 2 different authorities. Means its commercial and political functions were separated. Political functions or administrative functions, political or administrative, they were to be reported to Board of Control, and commercial to COD. Court of Directors, you already know what is Court of Director. We have explained 24 members. Okay. What is question before us? What is Board of Control? Board of Control had 6 members, 2 cabinet ministers, and 4 members of Privy Council. Four members of Privy Council. Privy Council was the highest court of appeal. Privy Council was the highest court of appeal. So, 4 Privy Council member, 2 cabinet ministers, making a total of 6. They are to be appointed by the British Prime Minister. That is called as Board of Control, and this Board of Control would look into the administrative functions or political functions of the East India Company, okay, administrative and political functions of the East India Company, and Court of Directors would look into the commercial functions of the East India Company. So, the British Government of India or the Company's Government of India will report to 2 different authorities: Board of Control for political and administrative and Court of Directors for commercial. So, existence of 2 authorities for 2 different sets of functions, that is the reason why it is called as double government. So, Pitt's India Act separated the commercial and administrative functions of the company or political functions of the English East India Company. True. Regulating Act provided for a Supreme Court at Calcutta, which had a Chief Justice, Elijah MP and 3 subordinate judges. I hope it is clear. So, this question number 5, answer will be C, both 1 and 2 are correct. Now, question number 6. With reference to Lord Wellesley, consider the following statements. Lord Wellesley, who declared himself as Bengal Tiger. Who declared himself as Bengal Tiger, and Lord Wellesley was the Governor General in this period 1798 to 1805, who was famous for his policy subsidiary alliance and played an important role in establishing the British rule firmly. He held reactionary views of the press. You see the year when he is becoming the Governor General, 1798. That is also the same year when in Europe a man was rising higher and higher on the political map of Europe, and he was Napoleon Bonaparte, an arch enemy of Britain. Napoleon used to say England as a country of shopkeepers. Why? Because British success was because of the mercantile community or because of the trading activities. So, he used to say England as a country of shopkeepers. And Napoleon in his early life had even marched up to Egypt. So, Wellesley was continuously facing this kind of threat. And in the wake of Napoleon's threat that he may march to India and British Empire will be threatened, he followed a policy called a subsidiary alliance and controlled the press also. So, he had reactionary or conservative views with respect to the press or the media. And he introduced the Censorship of the Press Act 1799, okay, which restricted what has to be published and what not. Means you have to seek permission from the government, okay, what you want to publish, what not, and where the newspaper will give the name of the printer, the name of the editor, the name of the proprietor. Proprietor मतलब मालिक जो भी पेपर चला रहा होगा. So, newspapers were heavily censored in the period of Wellesley, and Wellesley was doing all this because in the background of his own there was a lurking fear of Napoleon Bonaparte. So, both are true. Question number 6, C. Next, 7. Which of the following provisions were included in the Charter Act of 1833? So, first of all, before attempting any question for the East India Company or for the constitutional history, there are certain things which you need to know. And to begin with a story of the company, I will simply say the East India Company was a private trading company established in 1599, receiving a charter on 31st December 1600 to trade with the areas or with the seas east of Cape of Good Hope. This company came, started establishing factories in India. after almost more than 150 years of the arrival of the company, there started debate in the British Parliament in London. When initially company came, the debate was not strong enough there. Reason being, in the early years of the company, actually what kind of profit and what amount of profit company may earn from India, that was unclear. But after Plassey and Buxar, company and its officials started minting money. Like Robert Clive. Robert Clive had amassed huge wealth, who took part in the Battle of Plassey. And Robert Clive finally retired from the service of the company in 1772. And Clive joined the company's services as a clerk. But when he retired and reached Europe in 1772, he was the richest man in Europe. He was the richest man in Europe. So, the thing is that when the wealth started coming from India in large amount, mutual jealousies, because there are other companies whose owners also wanted to get a share in the eastern trade. This jealousy led to finally some kind of control mechanism to be put into place so that company could be regulated. So, this encouraged debate in the British Parliament. And finally, after this debate, monopoly retained, but company began to be given license for 20 years, a fixed number of years, 20 years. So, the first license, which was issued for a period of 20 years, that was Regulating Act 1773. It can also be called as Charter Act. But since it was the first time Parliament had enacted this law, first time I am saying, with the sole intention of regulating the trade of India, trade of the company with respect to India. So, therefore, it is called as Regulating Act 1773. And then with every gap of 20 years, charters began to be issued. Charters began to be issued. So, Regulating Act 1773 plus 20 year more, it is 1793, then plus 20, 1813, plus 20, 1830. Keep this thing aside. Now, in India, the Governor of Bengal or the Governor General of Bengal and company's officials, they were also fighting wars in India. For what reason? To expand the area, the base of the company, the territories of the company, because more territories will yield more profit to the company. More territories will yield more profit to the company. And then in this sequence, the Charter Act of 1833 was passed. So, the East India Company, which had come to India as a trading company, and after Plassey and Buxar, it started ruling also in certain parts of India, because it had been successful in the war and had defeated the Indian rulers, captured their territories. So, it had emerged both as a trading company and as a ruler. So, Charter Act of 1833 passed by the British Parliament did what? That it ended the commercial functions of the company. So, company henceforth would just be a administrative authority. So, number one, the trading activities of the East India Company were to be abolished, true, okay, that is true. Number two, the designation of the supreme authority was to be changed as the Governor General of India in Council. Yes, this Governor General, earlier they are called as Governor General of Bengal. They are called as Governor General of Bengal. But with the Charter Act of 1533, the power of the Governor General of Bengal, his privileges had been increased, and now he was simply called as Governor General of India. Governor General of India. So when the act was passed, already in India there was the Governor General of Bengal, William Bentinck. His total tenure (1828 to 33, 1833 to 35). So in this period of 28 to 33, he was the last Governor General of Bengal, and in this period he was the first Governor General of India. So William Bentinck was the last Governor General of Bengal and the first Governor General of India. Okay. So the designation of the Supreme Authority was to be changed as the Governor General of India in Council. Number 3, all law making powers to be conferred on the Governor General in Council. Yes, law making in India has to be done by the Governor General in Council. And this also say that he must be consulted by a law member. Means law making had to be done by Governor General of India in Council, but he should consult a person who would be expert in Indian laws. You see the fourth point? An Indian was to be appointed as a law member of the Governor General in Council. Everything is true except Indian. He was not Indian. And the first member to advise the Governor General in making law, because they are all British, they are all foreigner, not very much able to understand the Indian legal system. So somebody should be there who would be expert in Indian legal system, and that man was provided, or he was referred as law member, and the first law member was Thomas Babington Macaulay. So 1, 2, 3 are correct, fourth is wrong. Answer is D. Answer is D. So done, class. Next question, question number 8. So question number 8, he had a brief period as Governor General of India. He is known as Liberator of Indian Press. The given description refers to Lord Metcalfe. Now see the background. What was the background? Actually, I hope all of you know Ram Mohan Roy, a great social reformer, father of Indian Renaissance. During the period of Ram Mohan Roy, there was an acting Governor General. I am talking about a period before this William Bentinck. And that officiating or acting Governor General was John Adams. Ram Mohan Roy was a key promoter of education, and he wanted to spread political awareness. So for spreading political awareness among the Indians, Ram Mohan Roy brought a journal in Bengali. Year is not important, but I am mentioning here 21. So Ram Mohan Roy started publishing journal called as Sambad Kaumudi in the year 1821. This reactionary or this conservative Governor General officiating, John Adams, he did what? He brought a law, and the law is known as the Licensing Regulations 1823. The Licensing Regulations 1823. What does it mean? And interestingly, the law was put into effect retrospectively. The law was put into effect retrospectively, meaning it came into force from a previous date. So it can cover Sambad Kaumudi also. And what the law says? It says what? In order to publish a newspaper or anything like that, journal, you have to obtain first of all a printing press. Sorry, you have to obtain a license to establish a printing press. Means it was not like that at any point of time if somebody wanted to start a journal or newspaper, he would start just publishing it. He had to obtain a license. The Licensing Regulations 1823 itself is making it clear you need to obtain a license to start a printing press. Okay, that is known as the Licensing Regulations 1823. So Ram Mohan Roy's publication or journal Sambad Kaumudi was seized by the government. So Ram Mohan Roy did what? He filed a case in the Supreme Court, but the petition was dismissed by the judges. So after this, Ram Mohan Roy, along with the father of Rabindranath Tagore, Debendranath Tagore, after this, what he did? He started means along with Tagore, first agitation in India. Means before the national movement would begin, Ram Mohan Roy was the first Indian to start a political agitation or an agitation demanding freedom of the press. And this agitation demanding freedom of the press can obviously be termed as of political nature. So he became the first Indian to start a political agitation or an agitation demanding the freedom of the press. He died in Bristol in the year 1833. Once Bentinck retired, he was succeeded by Bentinck. Charles Metcalfe, who was again officiating Governor General in this period, 1835 to 36. And it was Charles Metcalfe who repealed the licensing regulations. Since he repealed the restriction on the journals or the persons that you obtain a license first of all, he repealed the law, Licensing Regulations 1823 of John Adams. So therefore, he became famous in history as the liberator of the press, 35 to 36. That was his period. So 8 done. Number 9. Which of the following states had to sign the Treaty of Subsidiary Alliance with British? As I told you, this subsidiary alliance was the policy of Richard Wellesley, who was the Governor General in this period, and I have already told you that why he did pursue, because of he was a bit scared of the impending threat of Napoleon Bonaparte. Under this subsidiary alliance, there were basically 4 things which a ruler had to do. If any ruler under pressure or from any other compulsion, if he signed subsidiary alliance, then he had to keep a British Indian army within his kingdom. Means he had to disband his own army. Okay. He had to disband his own army and keep a British army and would pay for its maintenance. Okay. He would have to pay for its maintenance. So, what an interesting thing that the British would maintain their army at the expense of the Indian ruler. Number 2, that ruler who is signing subsidiary alliance, he could not enter into any diplomatic relations with any other kingdom or state without taking permission from the company. Okay, without taking permission from the company. Thirdly, he could not employ any European into his service. Okay. So, this was what subsidiary alliance, and the subsidiary alliance was firstly signed by Hyderabad in the year 1798. Means Hyderabad was the first state to sign subsidiary alliance, and Mysore was the second state, 1799. Because 1799, in the month of May 1799, Tipu Sultan was killed. So, the Wadiyars, the next rulers, they accepted subsidiary alliance, and Tanjore was the third. Tanjore is in Tamil Nadu. So, basically it was Hyderabad, Mysore, Tanjore. I hope it is okay. Awadh was also a subsidiary alliance state, but Awadh signed somewhat later in the year 1801. And Maratha signed subsidiary alliance in 1802. In 1802. So, this is how the states had signed subsidiary alliance. So, which states? Answer will be all 1, 2 and 3. Number 10. With reference to the Treaty of Allahabad 1765, consider the following statements. It granted the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha to the English East India Company. True. It permitted the EIC to implement diarchy in Bengal. False. It turned Awadh into a buffer state. True. So, answer will be 1 and 3. The Battle of Buxar, which I was discussing and repeatedly had been referring to, after the Battle of Buxar, the company signed a treaty with the defeated rulers, and one such defeated ruler was Shah Alam II, and this treaty was signed at Allahabad in August 1765. And Mughal ruler Shah Alam II conferred on the company the Diwani right. Diwani right means what? Right to collect revenue from Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. So, this is true. It permitted the EIC to implement diarchy. No, this is not true. Diarchy was established in the year 1919, which I will take up in our next question, different question. It turned Awadh into a buffer state. If you draw the map of India, this is Bengal, this is Awadh. During this time, there had been impending threat from the Afghans, led by Ahmad Shah Abdali. So, company wanted to secure itself from the invasion of the Afghans, and therefore, it did not annex Awadh. The Awadh ruler Shujauddaulah had also been defeated in the Battle of Buxar, but it didn't annex because it wanted to keep Awadh as a buffer. So, this is true. 1 and 3 is true, so answer will be B. So, next 11 number. Consider the following pairs: book, translator. Who had translated which book? Bhagavad Gita was translated by Charles Wilkins. Manusmriti was translated by William Jones, and Vedas by the German scholar Max Muller. Near Connaught Place there is a building also called as Max Muller Bhavan. So, only third will be the correct answer. Bhagavad Gita by Charles Wilkins and Manusmriti by William Jones. Next. I am waiting, you note it down that only third statement is true. Consider the following pairs. So, on the one side are the treaties, on the other side were the wars. Treaty of Salbai. Treaty of Salbai was the result of the end of the first Anglo-Maratha war. These are correctly matched. So, this is true. Treaty of Srirangapatnam was signed after the third Mysore war. Okay. The third Mysore war, third Anglo-Mysore war was in the period 1792. Tipu Sultan was defeated in the third Anglo-Mysore war, and on the other side was Cornwallis. So, it was a treaty between Tipu Sultan and Cornwallis, third Mysore war, after the third Mysore war, and the treaty which was signed, that is called as Srirangapatnam. And Treaty of Lahore March 1846, that is first Anglo-Sikh war. With the Sikh state there are two wars, Anglo-Sikh war. First was 1845-46, second was 1848-49, and after the second war Sikh kingdom was annexed, and in both the wars Dalip Singh was the ruler, Sikh kingdom was annexed. In the first war, Treaty of Lahore was signed, which had provided that there would be a British resident in the court of Dalip Singh, the son of Maharaja Ranjit Singh at Lahore. And Treaty of Srirangapatnam, since Tipu was defeated, so Tipu had to give half of his territories to the British. And Treaty of Salbai was based on mutual restitution of each other's territories, means Marathas If they had been, they had taken some territories of the British, they would be returning, and if the British would have taken, British will return. So, no profit, no gain, no loss in the first with the Marathas. So, last two are wrong, only one is correct, answer will be 12A. (13) Who among the following established Asiatic Society of Bengal? Asiatic Society of Bengal was established by William Jones in the year 1784, who was greatly interested in Asian literature or Indian books. So, he translated so that British means government, British authority, British people can benefit because of these good books of Oriental world, Eastern world. Which of the following is the correct chronological order with reference to advent of European trading companies into India? So, correct trade order is A. Portuguese, Dutch, British, French. This is the order. Portuguese came to India in 1498, Dutch came in 1602, British came in 1608, French in 1664. So, answer is A. (15) Consider the following pairs regarding revenue settlements and places where they were imposed. Permanent settlement, Mahalwari settlement, Rayatwari system. Okay, class. The British government had taken over the land of India from the Mughals. And during the Mughal time also, it was not like that revenue was collected uniformly or in the same way or in similar fashion from everywhere. Plus, once the Mughals started declining, on their declining trend, several rulers started ruling in different parts of India and they became independent from the Mughal control. So, they had their own separate systems of revenue collection. British brought some changes in the already existing revenue settlement, introduced some new concepts, improvised upon the existing one, and introduced three different systems of revenue. These three different systems of revenue were parallelly operating in different parts of India. Means it was not overlapping because the areas were different. But at the same time, these three revenue systems were operating. Indian subcontinent had been subdued by the British. Indian subcontinent had been subdued by the British. But it was not like that each and every part of India had been ruled directly by the British. In certain regions, British had been directly ruling by annexing their kingdoms like Awadh in the year 1856, like Punjab in 1849. But in certain areas, our own rulers were also ruling. Those areas which had not been conquered, not annexed by the British and were left to the Indian rulers or Indian princes, those areas are called as princely states. So, this revenue settlement is not in the princely states, but in British India. Okay, was in British India. So, if you assume that British had directly been ruling over X square kilometer of India, X square kilometer. So, at any point of time, suppose I am taking the year when the British are leaving India 1947. So, in 1947, 19% of X goes for permanent settlement. 51% of X goes for Rayyatwari settlement and 30% goes for Mahalwadi settlement. You see total 100. Permanent settlement, which had 19%, it was in Bengal, and this permanent settlement was with the Jamindars. So therefore it is also known as Jamindari settlement. Permanent is also called as Jamindari settlement. Because it was the settlement was with the Jamindars, and these Jamindars were recognized as owners of the land. They were considered as owners of the land, they were called, okay, they were made as owners of the land. Since made with the Jamindar, so called as Jamindari also. Mahalwadi system was in Punjab, true, and Mahalwadi system had come from the word Mahal, where Mahal was the unit of assessment. Okay. The land revenue will be assessed based, okay, with respect to every Mahal, which was headed by any headman. And this Mahalwadi settlement was introduced in Punjab. Permanent settlement was by Cornwallis. Mahalwadi was by and Rayyatwari was in Madras, true, first of all are true, 1, 2 and 3. And Rayyatwari was introduced, Rayyatwari. Rayyatwari comes from the word Rayyat. Rayyat matlab peasants. This settlement was made directly with the peasants, so called as Rayyatwari. And this was introduced by Rayyatwari, Thomas Munro and Alexander Reed. Rayyatwari by Thomas Munro and Alexander Reed, Mahalwadi by Holt Mackenzie and R.M. Bird, and permanent settlement by Cornwallis. 3 settlements in 3 different parts of India, parallelly operating. Permanent 19%, permanent covers 19%, Mahalwadi covers 30%, and Rayyatwari maximum area was under Rayyatwari, covers 51%. So that's question number 15. Now question number 16. Which of the following introduced the principle of open competition to all natural born subjects of Her Majesty in Indian civil services? Answer is, see, Charter Act of 1853. Indian civil services, its history does not start with the exam. And in the earlier time period, Court of Directors could handpick any British national and could appoint them as ICS, Indian Civil Services. But the Charter Act of 1853 laid down a provision that there would be open competition for ICS, and any natural born person from the empire, means even in the colony, can take up the exam, though the exam was held in London. Okay, exam was held in London. So Charter Act of 1853 provided for the open competition. The provision was laid down in 53, but the first exam was held in London in the year 1855. Since exam was held in London, Greek and Latin languages were also being tested in the exam. So Indians faced a lot of difficulty in qualifying the civil services. Later on, after a few years, in the year 63-64, Satyendranath Tagore, the brother of Rabindranath Tagore, the elder brother, Satyendranath Tagore qualified the exam, ICS exam. So answer is C for question number 16. Next, Question number 17. With reference to deindustrialization, during the British rule, consider the following statements. It led to destruction of indigenous handicraft industries. True. It increased pressure on land. True. Class, till mid 18th century, till the beginning of industrial revolution in England, India manufactured, or India's contribution in the manufacturing sector in the world economy was 25%. Means 1/4 of the products were being manufactured here, handicraft products. Once industrial revolution started in England, the need arose for raw materials and market. Labor was already available in England. So England started dumping its goods, manufactured goods, into India. And since England started dumping industrialized goods, manufactured goods, and there is a theory that machine made goods would always be cheaper than the handmade goods. Our handicraft, obviously our goods were based on the use of manual labor or hand. So because of the competition which we have to face from the machine made goods of England, we started losing the ground. So our industries declined, and at the same time we do not see emergence of any modern industries. This process is known as deindustrialization. When there is decline of traditional industries, that is handicraft cottage industries, decline of traditional industries without the simultaneous growth of modern industries. This is what we witnessed in India. So deindustrialization led to destruction of indigenous handicraft industries. And since these handicraft industries were located in towns like Murshidabad, Dhaka, Patna, Surat, Agra, Ahmedabad, the people who started losing jobs, they started migrating to the rural areas. So in India, migration started from urban to rural. And as the migration started from urban to rural, more people started reverting to the rural areas. So it led to pressure on land, overburdening the land. And overburdening the land led to fragmentation of holdings, land holdings. So it increased pressure on land. So both the statements are true. 17. Done. Now question number 18. Dual or double government with reference to British administration in India refers to which of the following? An arrangement in which certain aspects are governed from Britain while others were managed by the company in India, no. An arrangement in which foreign affairs was managed by the company while law and order was managed by the Nawab of Bengal, no. An arrangement in which company collected revenues from while the Nawab managed the judiciary, no. An arrangement in which the company managed the revenues directly and its administration indirectly. This is true. This is true. Question number 18, dual or double government. As I said to you, after the Battle of Buxar, 1764, Buxar is not like Plassey. Plassey can be said as an act of betrayal. But the Battle of Buxar was not, or the success at Buxar of the company's forces was not a result of any betrayal. It was a military victory. After the Battle of Buxar, the entire northern India, or at least from Awadh to Bengal, was at the disposal of the company. Company could have started directly ruling, but it's the early years. Still, company was not mentally ready to take over the responsibility of administering Bengal. So it devised a unique arrangement whereby company signed a treaty with the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, which I told you in the earlier discussion, in August 1765 at Allahabad. And from this treaty, company got the right of revenue collection, that is Diwani right. Company received the right of revenue collection, Diwani right, of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. And company directly assumed the right of revenue collection, an arrangement in which the company managed the revenues directly and its administration indirectly. For administering Bengal, what it did, that it asked the Nawab, who was the son of Mir Zafar, Nizamuddaulah, that the company itself did not want to be the ruler, so company became the kingmaker and company placed on the throne this Nizamuddaulah. But Bengal administration was to be administered by a subordinate, at least in theory. Subordinate who was called as Deputy Subedar. Was called as Deputy Subedar. So the subordinate would administer Bengal, and this subordinate, who was an Indian, was to be appointed by the company and could be removed only by the company. So company, by appointing Deputy Subedar who will administer Bengal, got the right of administration of Bengal, though indirectly, and directly started collecting revenue. So this is called as dual government, because at least in theory there is the rule of two, one for revenue collection and another for administration. So rule of two is leading to dual or double government. So question number 18, answer will be D. Question number 19. Consider the following. Which of the above were reasons for Nadir Shah's invasion of India in 1738? See, Nadir Shah, the ruler of Persia, invaded India because, as usual, for all the people, one medieval time or even early modern time, attraction of India's wealth was a key factor. Apart from this, there was bankruptcy in Persia because of continuous campaigns by Nadir Shah or by earlier rulers. So the treasury was gradually becoming empty. Invitations from the Rohillas. Rohillas is the area, means the area where the Rohillas were in power is modern day Bareilly, Rohilkhand hum bolte hain. But they did not invite, rather the Nawab of Awadh had invited Nadir Shah. So this is wrong, first and second is correct, answer will be for the question number 19, C 1 and 2. Next question, question number 20. Who among the following abolished jizya and also encouraged ijara? Answer is A, Zulfikar Khan. Okay. See, as far as jizya is concerned, it's the most confusing question in the medieval history. और मैं आपको बताना चाहूँगा कि इसके बारे में दो तीन चीज़ें आप जान लीजिए, उसके बाद कुछ जानने की जरूरत नहीं है। पहली चीज़ जो कंसेप्चुअल क्लैरिटी होनी चाहिए, जजिया वॉज अ टैक्स which was imposed on non-Muslim. Jizya was not a tax which was imposed on Hindus. See the difference. Non-Muslim में कुछ भी हो सकता है. Non-Muslim does not explicitly mean Hindu. Jizya was a tax which was imposed on non-Muslims. Why it was imposed? In medieval times, ours did not have a secular state. It was theocratic state, having a religious identity of its own. And under this theory, since the ruler was a Muslim and the state was a theocratic nature, so anyone living in that kingdom or state of a Muslim ruler, if he wants to get protected or protection, he must pay a tax if he is not a Muslim. That tax is called as jizya. The tax is called as jizya. And jizya used to be collected from medieval times, but Akbar abolished it. in the year 1564. Akbar abolished in the year 1564. Aurangzeb reimposed it in 1679. Akbar abolished in 1564 and Aurangzeb reimposed in 1679. Once Mughal authority declined after the death of Aurangzeb, the rulers who were called as later rulers, later Mughals, they abolished jizya. Here, these three are Mughal rulers. They passed decrees for abolition of jizya. So that is the reason why this confusion remains. And Zulfikar Khan was a noble, was an officer under a Mughal ruler Jahandar Shah. Jahandar Shah. So that is the reason why the hint was given. Under this Jahandar Shah, the noble Zulfikar Khan had abolished jizya. Even Bahadur Shah had also ordered for abolition of jizya. But the hint was that, and also encouraged ijara. Ijara encouraged करने वाला Zulfikar ही था. And what is ijara? Ijara is auctioning the land to the highest bidder, also known as revenue farming. Also known as revenue farming. Auctioning the land to the highest bidder or revenue farming. Suppose there is a ruler, hypothetically assume, ruling over 100 square kilometer, 200 square kilometer. If the ruler would have been keen, he would develop a very scientific system for revenue collection. So what is ijara or revenue farming? That the ruler is a pleasure seeking person, and ruler did what? Ruler asked his own officers that auction the land, कि जो बोलेगा कि इस land से हम maximum revenue देंगे उसी को land दे दो. This is called as auctioning. Okay? Auctioning the land to the highest bidder. जहाँ लैंड के लिए आपके पास सपोज करो 50 एकड़ लैंड है और 100 एकड़ लैंड and there are 4-5 villages being settled there. You are collecting the revenue, okay, with the help of your own men. Since you are holding the land, since your parents were owners, your forefathers were owners, so if you would have been to a village rural society, naturally you would be attached to the land also. You know the people who had been cultivating the land. So you would have some sort of emotional connect with them. But if a reckless person would be there who is not interested in the welfare of its own people who had been living in that land, he will simply say auction कर दो, नीलाम कर दो, कि जो जैसा मैक्सिमम बोली देगा हम उसी को लैंड दे देंगे रेवेन्यू कलेक्ट करने के लिए. मैक्सिमम से क्या होगा कि मैक्सिमम पैसा आ जाएगा रूलर के पास. But who will suffer? Peasants will suffer. Because then the person who will get the land through auctioning system, he will also try to exploit maximum. So this was being done by Zulfikar.